Alrighty, sorry about the delay. Welcome back to another thrilling installment of Free Read Fridays. That's the wrong button. I am your intrepid narrator. That's also the wrong button. Fragath, and today we're having a scrambled mess of a morning, apparently. Slash noon slash afternoon, whatever. As for the last several weeks, we'll be reading more of The Jesus Incident by Bill Ransom and Frank Herbert. Um, so previously on, uh, our boy Raja Thomas slash Flattery is along with Waela TaoLini and Kerro Panille are about to utilize a new confabulation that he's engineered or had engineered, which basically sounds like a bathyscaphe, um, where you've got kind of a bathysphere dangling from a bathysphere sub. I think is it a bathysphere dangling from a sub which is connected to an LTA lighter than air blimpy thing. I can't remember now, but it's bathyscaphe adjacent. At any rate, it's an observation device with lights built into it and recording equipment that they are going to hang from underwater and try and communicate with and interact with the kelp, the lectrokelp, um, which we will soon learn has another name, but we kind of already know that. We just don't know that we know that. More on that later. Let's see. I keep forgetting to get the maps from the beginning of the book. I will try and do that before the last one. Trying to remember. Oh yeah, Rachel Demer. Oh yes, Morgan Oakes is making a power move right now, where he's basically going down to the colony on Pandora and taking direct charge of everything going on, and saying, "Hey, the ship isn't God. It's not ship with a capital S. It is the ship, and it is a malfunctioning computer that is steadily getting less and less reliable. I am not unreliable. I am a demagogue. You should listen to me. There will be no vote." Um, and basically does a power move to insinuate himself and bolster his power ground side and establish that this is where he's going to be, away from ship as well, so that ship can't kill him, um, which is a fear he has, which may or may not be justified. Um, yes, as a result, he winds up having Rachel Demarest, who is a colonist and is involved in a certain degree of politicking on the surface. She is sent to the screen room for, shall we say, re-education. This is unpleasant. The screen room's pretty grody. Legata Hamill has also been sent to the screen room. She has just gotten there. And so things that we now know about Legata Hamill, she's actually super duper strong, even though she apparently doesn't look it. She's relatively slight looking, but she could like crush you in half pretty effortlessly. So we've got all kinds of interesting genetic mutations in people. We also are having some of the politics of clones versus non-clones, uh, free births or natal births, um, which is more important for this book than the subsequent ones for reasons that will become clear quickly. Not when we start the next book along. I mean, well, actually, by the time we hit the end of this one, it'll be clearish. But it's things are going to start building to a head, and I think that's fair to say without saying it's a spoiler. It's not. We are starting to ramp things up. Um, so Legata Hamill is. I think Oakes isn't too thrilled that she's been sent to the screen room. Um, I don't think he was the one who had her sent there because she's more useful to him uh, as is, but this will apparently make her more controllable in some way. More on that later. There was something else. Oh, yeah. And Hallie Eckel has seen the Jesus incident, um, where Jesus gets crucified and may or may not have been a man from beyond time, among other things. So she is now basically in with Ship pretty good, um, interacting with Ship at any rate, which well, we'll see how that changes her relationship with Kerro Panille later. Because right now she's still on Ship and he's groundside, so who knows? I'll say there was some other relevant thing that happened last time, but I can't remember what it was. Those were the biggies, I think. We did get introduced to the engineer. Uh, what's his name? Hapat Lavu. He's the guy who has built a number of existing submersibles and submersible adjacent equipment for these various experiments and projects to interact with the lectrokelp, which again Waela TaoLini was a part of, one that went disastrously wrong. Um, and she was the only survivor. And there have been several that have been done, and almost all of them have gone poorly. The lectrokelp doesn't like being snipped and prodded too hard. So this is a dangerous enterprise that they're engaging in. So they've got Raj Thomas, who is a chaplain psychologist tasked by Ship um, to interact with the lectrokelp and also put the question to the colonists of how they should worship Ship. We've got Waela TaoLini, who is a researcher of the lectrokelp, um, and kind of has a chip on her shoulder slash has something to prove because things have gone kind of poorly in that arena. And we have Kerro Panille, who is a poet. So, without further ado, that's enough blather. Let's get rocking and rolling. And yeah, let's have some fun. Humans spend their lives in mazes. If they escape and cannot find another maze, they create one. What is this passion for testing? Kerro Panille. Questions from the Avata. Raja Thomas awoke in darkness, and it was like the most recent time awakening in Hybe. He found himself disoriented in darkness, waiting for dangers he could not locate. Slowly it came to him that he was in his groundside cubby. Night. He glanced at the luminous time display beside his pallet. 2 hours into the midnight watch. What awakened me? His cubby was 8 levels under the Pandoran surface, a choice location cushioned from surface noises and perils by numerous color-coded passages, locks, hatches, slide tubes, and seemingly endless branchings. The ship trained found no difficulty recording mental maps of such layouts. The more remote the address, the better. Thomas resented being buried in these depths. Too much travel time to places which demanded his attention. Lab 1. He had gone to sleep while wondering about the restricted about excuse me. He had got Geez, I don't know why my throat is catching. He had gone to sleep while wondering about that restricted place. the source of so many odd rumors.
They're breeding people who are faster than the demons.
That was the popular story.
Oakes and Lewis want nothing but servile zombies.
Thomas had heard that story from one of the new militants, a fiery young woman associate of Rachel Demarest. Slowly he sat up and tried to probe the darkness around him. Odd I should awaken at this hour. He touched the light plate on the wall beside his head, and a dim glow replaced the dark. The cubby appeared boringly normal, his single suit draped over a slide seat. Sandals. Everything as it should be. I feel like a damn spinneret down here. He spoke it aloud while rubbing his face. Presently he summoned a servo, then slipped into his clothing while waiting for it. The servo buzzed his hatch, and he stepped out into an empty passage lighted by the widely spaced ceiling bulbs of Nightside. Seating himself in the servo, he ordered it to take him topside. He felt oppressed by the travel time, the weight of construction overhead. I never needed open spaces shipside. Maybe I'm going native. The servo emitted an irritating hum full of subsonics. At the surface autosentry checkpoint, he keyed his code into the system. With the green "Go" signal came the blinking yellow light for Condition 2. He swore under his breath, then turned to the lockers beside the topside hatch and took out a laser gun. He knew the hatch would not open unless he did this. The weapon felt clumsy in his hands, and, when he holstered it, he was intensely conscious of the weight at his waist. Doesn't take much sense to know you shouldn't live in a place if you have to carry a gun. He muttered it, but his voice was loud enough that the blue "Acknowledge" light winked at him from the sentry plate. Still, the hatch remained sealed to him. His hand was moving toward the override switch when he saw the little blinker at the bottom of the plate demanding, "Purpose of movement?" "Work inspection," he said. The system digested this, then opened the hatch. Thomas slipped off the servo and strode out into the topside corridors, sure now of why he had awakened at this hour. Lab 1. It was a mystery of peculiar odor. He found himself, presently, in the darkened perimeter halls, passing an occasional worker and the well-spaced extrusions of sentry posts, each with its armed occupant paying attention only to the nightside landscape. Plasports showed Thomas that it was moonlight out there, 2 moons quartering the southern horizon. Pandora's night was a buzz of shadows. After a space, the ring passage ramped downward into a hatch distribution dome about 30 meters in diameter. The passage to Lab 1 was indicated by an L1 sign on his right. He had taken only 2 steps toward it when it opened and a woman emerged, slamming the hatch behind her. It was dim in the dome, lighted only by the moonlight coming in through plasports on his left, but there was no mistaking the almost disjointed agitation in her movements. The woman darted toward him, grabbing his arm as he passed, dragging him along toward the external ports with a strength which astonished him. "Come here! I need you!" Her voice was husky and full of odd undertones. Her face and arms were a mass of scratches, and he sensed the unmistakable odor of blood on her light single suit. "What?" "Don't question me!" There was a wildness, a touch of insanity in her voice. And she was beautiful. She released him when they reached the barrier wall, and he saw the dim outline of an emergency hatch to Pandora's perilous open air. Her hands were busy at the hatch controls, keying the override system in a way that did not set off the alarms. One of her hands reached out and grabbed his right wrist, guiding his hand to the lock mechanism. Such strength in her. "When I say go, open this hatch. Wait 23 minutes, then look for me. Let me in." Before he could find the words to protest, she slipped out of her single suit and thrust it at him. He caught it involuntarily with his free hand. She already was crouching to thong her feet, and he saw that she had a magnificent body, smooth muscles, a supple perfection, but swatches of cell tape crisscrossed her skin. "What's happened to you?" "I warned you once not to question." She spoke without looking up, and he sensed the wild power in her. Dangerous. Very dangerous. No inhibitions. "You're going to run the P," he said. He glanced around, looking for someone, anyone, to call on for help. The circle of the distribution dome contained no other people. "Bet on me," she said, standing. "How will I tell the 23 minutes?" he asked. She crowded close to him and slapped a panel beside the emergency hatch. Immediately he heard the sentry circuits hum, then a deep male voice. "Post 9 clear." A tiny screen above the circuit speaker glowed with red numerals. 229. "The hatch," she said. There was no way to avoid it. He had felt her wild strength. He undogged the hatch and she thrust past him, swinging it wide as she dashed out into the open, turning right. Her body was a silver blur in the moonlight, and he saw a dark shadow coming up behind her. His gun was in his hand without thinking about it, and he cooked a hooded dasher that was only a step behind her. She did not turn. His hands were shaking as he resealed the hatch. Running the P. He glanced at the time signal. 2:29. She had said 23 minutes. That would put her back at the hatch by 2:52. It occurred to him then that the perimeter was just under 10 kilometers. It can't be done. No one can run 10 kilometers in 23 minutes. But she had come from the passage to Lab 1. He unwadded her single suit. Blood on it, no doubt of that. Her name was stitched over the left breast. Legata. He wondered if it was a first or last name, or a title. He peered out of the Plaz port, looking to the left where she would have to appear if she really did run the perimeter. What would a Legata be? A voice on the sentry circuit startled him.
Someone's out there, pretty far out.
Another voice answered.
It's a woman running the P. She just rounded post 38. Who is it? Too far out to identify.
Thomas found himself praying for her to make it as he listened to each succeeding post report the runner. But he knew there was not much chance. Since learning about the game from Waela, he had looked into the statistics. 50-50 in dayside, yes. But nightside, fewer than 1 in 50 made it. The timer beside his head moved with an agonizing slowness. 2:48. It seemed to him that it took an hour shifting to 2:49. The sentries were silent now. Why didn't the sentries mark her passage? As though to answer him, a voice on the circuit said, "She just rounded East 89.
Who the hell is that out there?
She's too far out to identify." Thomas drew his lasgun and put a hand on the hatchdog. The word was that the last minutes were the worst, Pandora's demons ganging up on the runner. He peered out into the moon shadows. 2:50. He spun the hatchdog, opened it a crack. No movement. Nothing. Not even a demon. He found that he was swearing under his breath, muttering, "Come on, Legata. Come on. You can do it. Don't blow the fucking run at the end." Something flickered in the shadows off to his left. He swung the hatch wide. There she was! It was like a dance, leaping, dodging. Something large and black swerved behind her. Thomas took careful aim and burned another dasher as she sped past him without breaking her stride. There was a musky odor of perspiration from her. He slammed the hatch and dogged it. Something crashed into the barrier as he sealed it. Too late, you fucker! He turned to see her slipping through the Lab 1 hatchway, her single suit in hand. She waved to him as the hatch hissed shut. Legata, he thought. Then, 10 clicks in 23 minutes. There was a babble of conversation on the sentry circuit.
Anybody know who that was?
Negative. Where'd she go? Somewhere over near Lab 1 dome. Shit, that must have been the fastest time ever. Thomas slapped the switch to shut them off, but not before a male voice said, "I'd sure like to have that little honey chasing." Thomas crossed over to the Lab 1 hatch, heaved on the dog. It refused to move, sealed. All that just to put a hash mark above her eyebrow? No, it had to be much more than the mark of success. What were they doing down there in Lab 1? Again he tried the hatch dog. It refused to budge. He shook his head and walked slowly back to the auto-sentry gate, where he picked up a servo and rode it to his quarters. All the way down he kept wondering, what the hell's a Legata?
The clone of a clone does not necessarily stay closer to the original than a clone of the older original. It depends on cellular interference and other elements which may be introduced. Passage of time always introduces other elements.
Jesus Lewis, The New Cloning Manual. Oakes snapped off the holo and swiveled his chair around to stare at the design on the wall of his groundside cubby. He did not like this place. It was smaller than his quarters shipside. The air smelled strange. He did not like the casual way some of the colonists treated him. He found himself constantly aware of Pandora's surface, right out there. Never mind that it was many layers of colony construction beyond his quarters. It was right out there. Despite the few familiar furnishings he had brought groundside, this place would never feel as comfortable as his old shipside cubby. Except that the dangers of the ship, the dangers which only he knew, were more distant. Oakes sighed. It was late dayside, and he still had many things to do, but what he had seen on the holo compelled his attention.
A most unsatisfactory performance.
He chewed at his lower lip.
No, it was more than unsatisfactory. Disturbing.
Oakes leaned back and tried to relax. The holo of Legata's visit to the scream room filled him with disquiet. He shook his head. In spite of the drug suppressing her cortical responses, she had resisted. Nothing in her scream room performance could be held against her, except... No, she had done nothing.
Nothing.
If he had not seen it for himself, would she ask to see this holo? He thought not, but nothing was certain. None of the others had asked to see their holos, although everyone knew such a record was made. Legata had not performed according to pattern. Things were done to her, and she resisted other things. The holo gave him no absolutely secure hold on her.
If she sees that holo, she'll know.
How could he keep the record of it from the best-known search technician?
Was it a mistake, sending her into the scream room?
But he thought he still knew her. Yes. She would not take action against him unless she were in great pain. And she might not ask for the holo. Might not. Not once in the scream room had Legata sought her own pleasure. She had acted only in reaction to the application of pain.
Pain that I commanded.
This made him uncomfortable.
It was necessary.
Given an adversary as potent as the ship, he had to take extreme measures. He had to explore the limits.
I'm justified.
Legata had not even required sedation after emerging from the scream room.
Where did she go, dashing off like that with only the minimal cell tape on her wounds?
She had returned naked, carrying her single suit. Oakes had heard the rumors that someone had run the perimeter in that interval. Surely not Legata. A coincidence, no more. And the proof of it was she wore no hash mark.
Damn fool, running in the open at night like that. He would have liked to prohibit the game, but Lewis had warned him off of this, and his own good sense had agreed. There was no way to prevent the game without wasting too much manpower policing all the hatches. Besides, the game vented certain impulses of violence.
Legata running the perimeter? Certainly not.
Efficient, damned woman! She was expected back at work by evening, the physical marks of her scream room experience almost gone. He looked at the notes beside his left hand. Unconsciously, he had addressed them to her.
Check on possible relationship between waxing of algae and growth of lectrokelp. Have Lab 1 begin 2 LH clones. Map new data on dissidents. Special attention to those associated with Rachel Demarest.
Would Legata even take his orders now? The picture of Legata's face from the holo record kept slipping back into his mind.
She trusted me.
Had she really trusted him? Why else would she go back to Lab 1 when her misgivings about it were all that apparent? With anyone else, he would have laughed at such musings, but not with Legata. She was painfully different from the others, and he had already taken her too far.
Entertainment time.
It had not been as entertaining as he had expected. He recalled the first potent look of betrayal in her eyes when the sonics hit her. The sonics had driven away the clones. They already had taken their entertainment. But even heavy pain had not moved Legata. Despite sedation, she could hear Murdoch's commands. And the sedation had been designed to suppress her will. But she resisted. Murdoch's commands told her what to do, the clone was prepared, the equipment set, but even then she had to be totally awash with pain before inflicting anything like her own agony on the clone. Most of the time her gaze had sought out the holo scanner. She had stared directly into the scanner, and the dimming of her eyes gave him no pleasure. No pleasure at all.
She won't remember. They never do.
Most of the subjects begged, offered anything for the pain to stop. Legata simply stared at the scanner, wide-eyed. Somewhere in her, he knew, there had been awareness that she was totally helpless, totally subject to his every whim. It was a conditioning process. He wanted her to be like the rest. He could deal with that. But he had been unprepared for the shock of her difference. Yes, she was different. What a shock, finally discovering this magnificent difference, to know that he had destroyed it. Whatever private trust they might have had was gone forever.
Forever.
She would never again trust him completely. Oh, she would obey, perhaps even more promptly now, but no trust. He felt himself shaking with this knowledge, tense, distracted. He had to force himself to relax, to concentrate on something which comforted.
Nothing is forever,
he thought. Presently he drifted into his own peculiar arena of sleep, but it was a sleep haunted by the design on his cubby wall. The design took on distorted shapes from the holo of Legata in the scream room. Scream room! And Pandora was right out there. And tomorrow. Human Kerro. Does the listener protect his own sense of understanding and consciousness? Avata. Ah, you are building barriers. Human Kerro. That's what you call the illusion of understanding, is it not? Avata. If you understand, then you cannot learn. By saying you understand, you construct barriers. Human Kerro. But I can remember understanding things. Avata. Memory only understands the presence or absence of electrical signals. Human Kerro.
Then what's the combination, the program for learning?
Avata. Now you open the path. It is the program which counts in the most literal sense.
Human Kerro. But what are the rules?
Avata. There are rules underlying every aspect of human life? Oh, sorry. Are there rules underlying every aspect of human life? Is that your question?
Human Kerro. That appears to be the question.
Avata. Then answer it. What are the rules for being human?
Human Kerro. But I asked you.
Avata. But you are human, and I am Avata.
Human Kerro. Well, what are the rules for being Avata?
Avata. Ah, human Kerro, we embody such knowledge, but we cannot know it. We embody such knowledge, but we cannot know it.
There we go. Emphasis on the right syllable. Human Kerro. You appear to be saying that such knowledge cannot be reduced to language.
Avata. Language cannot occur in a reference vacuum.
Human Kerro. Don't we know what we're talking about?
Avata. Using language involves much more than recognizing strings of words. Language and the world to which it refers.
Human Kerro. The script of the play.
Avata. The script, yes. The script of the game and its world must be interrelated. How can you substitute a word or some other symbol for every cellular element of your body?
Human Kerro. I can talk with my body.
Avata. For that, you do not need a script.
Kerro Panille. The Avata. The Q&A game. Oh, thanks for tuning in, Booberry Pakalolo. Yes, the Scream Room is is pretty nasty, and Legata Hamill is she's special. She's something else. She's pretty cool. She's got a lot going on, and it feels like her role in this book is a bit more rushed than I'd like, but that's partly because there's so much going on in the book already with all these characters. It's a big cast and a ton is happening.
The mystery of consciousness, erroneous data, significance. Oh, geez. The mystery of consciousness, erroneous data, significant results.
P. Wagand, Void Ship Medtech. Welcome back to the plot, Prue! Sort of. At least she's been referenced. Oakes watched the sentry on the colony scanner. The man writhed and screamed in agony. The evening light of Alki cast long purple Alki is one of the moons. The evening light of Alki cast long purple shadows which twisted as the man flopped and turned. The current outside activity circuits reproduced the sounds of the sentry with clear fidelity, terrifyingly immediate. The man might be just outside this cubby's hatch instead of on Colony's north perimeter, as the sensor log indicated. The screams turned to a hoarse growl, like a turbine running down. There came a convulsive flopping, shudders, then quiet. Oakes found that the sentry's first screams still echoed in memory and would not be silenced. Runners! Runners! There was no escaping Pandora anywhere groundside. Colony still remained under constant siege. And at the redoubt, sterilization was their only solution. Kill everything. Oakes found that he had pressed his hands to his ears trying to quiet the memory of those screams. Slowly, he brought his hands down to the scanner controls, looking at them as though they had betrayed him. He had just been running through the available sensors, scanning for any random COA which might require his attention, and he had encountered horror. Images continued to play in his mind. The sentry had clawed at his own eyes, ripping out the nerve tissue which runners found so succulent. But he must have known what every colonist knew. There could be no help for him. Once runners contacted nerve tissue, they could not be stopped until they insisted their clutch of eggs in his brain. Except that this particular sentry knew about chlorine. Had some residual hope clutched at his doomed awareness? Surely not. Once the runners were in his flesh, that was too late even for chlorine. To Oakes, the most horrible part of the incident was that he knew the sentry. Illuyank. Part of Murdoch's Lab 1 crew, and before that, the doomed sentry had been with Lewis on Black Dragon Redoubt. Illuyank had been a survivor, 3 times running the P, and one of those who came back from Edmund Kingston's team. Illuyank had even come shipside to report on Kingston's failure.
I heard his report.
Movement in the scanner riveted Oak's attention. The sentry's backup stepped into view, not too close, with laser gun at the ready. The backup was marked as an ultimate coward by colony rules. He had not been able to shoot the doomed Illuyank. So the runner's victim had died the most miserable death Pandora could offer. Now the backup aimed his gun and burned Illuyank's head to char. Standard procedure.
Cook them out.
Those eggs, at least, would never hatch. Oakes found the strength to switch off the scanner. His body was shaking so hard he could not move himself away from the console. It had just been a routine scan, the kind of thing he did regularly shipside. The horror of this place.
What has ship done to us?
Groundside. Nowhere to turn for escape. No release from the knowledge that he could not survive on this synapse-quick world without multiple barriers and constant guarding. And there was no turning back. Lewis was right. Colony required constant attention. Delicate decisions about personnel movements and assignments, the shifting of supplies and equipment to Redoubt. None of this could be trusted to shipside, groundside communications channels. Shipside to groundside communications channels, I think. Pandora required swift action and reaction. Lewis could not divide his attention between Redoubt and Colony. Oakes pressed a thumb against the lump of pellet in his neck. Useless now. Groundside static interference limited range, and when that impediment lifted, as it did for brief moments, the random signals which came through proved that their secrecy had been breached. The ship had to be the source of those signals. The ship! Still interfering. The pellets would have to come out at the first opportunity. Oakes lifted a bottle from the floor beside his console. His hand still shook from the shock of Illuyank's death. He tried to pour a glass of wine and slopped most of it over his console where the sticky red splash reminded him of blood pulsing out of the sentry's empty sockets, out of his nose, his mouth. The 3 tattooed hash marks over Illuyank's left eye remained burned in Oak's memory.
Damn this place!
Gripping the glass with both hands, Oakes drained what little remained in it. Even that small swallow soothed his stomach.
At least I won't throw up.
He put the empty glass on the lip of his console, and his gaze swept around the confines of his cubby. It was not big enough. He longed for the space he'd enjoyed shipside. But there could be no retreat, no return to the slavery of the ship.
We're going to beat you, ship. Bravo!
Everything groundside reminded him that he did not belong here. The speed of the colonists! There was nothing like that speed shipside. Oakes knew he was too heavy, too out of condition to consider keeping up, much less protecting himself. He needed constant guarding. It festered in him that Illuyank had been one of the people considered for his own guard force. Illuyank was supposed to be a survivor. Even survivors die here. He had to get out of this room, had to walk somewhere. But when he pushed himself away from the console to stand and turn around, he confronted another wall. It came to him then that the loss of his lavish shipside cubby was a greater blow than anticipated. He needed the redoubt for physical and psychological reasons, as well as for a secure base of command. This damned cubby was larger than any other groundside, but by the time they housed his command console, his holo equipment, and the other accoutrements of the CP, he was almost crowded out.
There's no room to breathe in here.
He put a hand to the hatch dogs, wanting the release of a walk in the corridors, but when his hand touched cold metal he realized how all of those corridors led to the open, unguarded surface of Pandora. The hatch was one more barrier against the ravages of this place.
I'll eat something.
And perhaps Legata could be summoned on some pretext. Practical Legata. Lovely Legata. How useful she remained, except that he did not like what had happened deep in her eyes. Was it time to ask Lewis for a replacement? Oakes could not find the will to do this.
I made a mistake with her.
He could admit this only to himself. It had been a mistake sending Legata to the scream room.
She's changed.
She reminded him now of the shipside agrarium workers. What had really impressed him out there was the difference between those workers and other shipmen. Agrarium workers were a tight-lipped lot and always busy, sometimes noisy in their work, but silent in themselves. That was it. Legata had become silent in herself. She was like the agrarium workers, containing seriousness, almost a reverence, not the grimness found in the vitro labs or around the axolotl tanks where Lewis produced his miracles, but something else. It occurred to Oakes that the agraria were the only parts of the ship where he had felt out of place. This thought disturbed him.
Legata makes me feel out of place now.
And there was no escaping the choices he had made. He would have to live with the consequences. Choices resulted from information. He had acted on bad information.
Who gave me that bad information? Lewis?
What control systems reposed in the information, leading inevitably to certain choices? Such a simple question. He turned it over in his mind, feeling that it put him on the track of something vital. Perhaps it was the key to the ship's true nature, a key somewhere in the flow of information. Information to choice to action. Simple, always simple. The true scientist was required to suspect complexity.
Occam's razor really cuts.
What choices did the ship make, and on the basis of what information? Would the ship openly oppose moving the Natali groundside, for instance? The move could not yet be made, but the possibility of open opposition excited him. He longed for such opposition.
Show your hand, you mechanical monster! The ship can act without hands.
But could the ship act without curiosity and without leaving clues? As an intelligent, questioning being, Oakes felt the constant need to sharpen his curiosity, to keep himself in motion. He might not always move smoothly, that business with Legata, but he had to move. In jumps and fits and starts, whatever. The success of his movements stayed relative to his own intelligence and the information available.
Better information.
Excitement shot through him.
With the right information, could he design the test which would prove, once and for all, that the ship was not God? An end to the ship's pretenses forever. What information did he possess? The ship's consciousness? It had to be conscious. To assume otherwise would be to move backward. Bad choice. Whatever else it might be, the ship could only be viewed as a complex intelligence. A truly intelligent being might move seldom, but it would move surely and on the basis of reliable information which had been tested somehow for predictability.
Testing by large numbers or over a long time. One or the other.
How long had the ship been testing its shipmen? In a pure chance universe, past results could not always guarantee predictions. Could the ship's decisions be predicted? Oakes felt his heart thumping hard and fast. In this game, he truly felt himself come alive. It was like sex, but this could be even bigger. The biggest game in the universe. If ship's movements and choices could be predicted, they could be precipitated. He would have the key to quick and easy victory on Pandora. What action could he take to link the ship's powers to his own desires? Given the right information, he could control even a god.
Control.
What was prayer but a whining, sniveling attempt to control? Supplication? Threats?
If you don't get me assigned to medical ship, I'll abandon warship.
So much for warship. The gods, if there were any, could have a good laugh. Abruptly, he was sobered by memory of Iluyank's death.
Damn this place.
To walk in a shipside agrarium right now, or even in a tree dome. He remembered once nightside on the ship, walking out through the shutter baffles to a dome on the rim, pressing his forehead against the plas to stare into the void. Out there, stars whirled in their slow spin, and he had known, beyond a doubt, that they spun around him. But, in the face of those uncounted stars, he had felt himself slipping into a maw of terrifying black. On the other side of that plasma glass barrier, whole galaxies awoke and whole galaxies died every second. No call for help could carry beyond the tip of his own tongue. No caress could survive the cold. Who else in that universe was this much alone? Ship. The voice of his mind had spoken the unexpected. But he had known it for the truth. In that instant he had seen, in the plas, the reflection of his own eyes melting into the dark between the stars. He recalled that he had stepped back in mute surprise.
That look, that same expression.
It had been on the face of the black man back on Earth when they took the men away. Remembering, he realized it was the same expression he now saw in Legata's eyes. In Legata's eyes.
In my eyes. In her eyes. In the eyes of the black man from my childhood.
Now, feeling the groundside cubby around him, all of the concentric rings of walls and barriers which comprised colony, he sensed how his unguarded body could be betrayed.
I could betray myself to myself.
And perhaps to others.
To Thomas? To the ship?
No matter his denials, the mystery of deep space and inner space filled him with wonder and fear. This was a weakness, and it required that he deal with it directly. God or not, the ship was one of a kind.
As I am.
And what if ship were really God? Oakes passed his tongue over his lips. He stood alone in the center of his cubby and listened.
For what am I listening?
He could only move by testing, by forcing the exchange, by groping beyond the ken of all other shipmen. The key to the ship lay in its movements. Why did any organism move?
Why did any organism move? Sorry. To seek pleasure, to avoid pain.
Food was pleasure. He felt hunger gnawed at his stomach. Sex was pleasure. Where was Legata right now? Victory was pleasure. That would have to wait. Let the pains demand their own actions. Always the pendulum swung. Pleasure, pain. Pleasure, pain. Intensity and period varied. The balance, the mean, did not. What sweets would tempt a god? What thorn would lift a god's foot? It came over Oakes that he had been standing for a long time in one position, his gaze fixed on the mandala pattern attached to his cubby wall. It copied the one he had left shipside. Legata had made this copy for him before. She had produced another in her finest hand, and it already was displayed at the redoubt. How he wished the redoubt were ready! Demons gone, dayside and nightside safe. Many times he had dreamed of stepping out into Pandora's double sunshine, a light breeze ruffling his hair, Legata on his arm for a walk through gardens down to a gentle sea. A sudden image of Legata clawing at her eyes replaced this pastoral vision. Oakes fought for a deep breath, his gaze fixed on the mandala.
Lewis has to destroy all of the demons. The kelp, everything.
It required a physical effort for Oakes to break himself away from his fixation on the mandala. He turned, walked 3 steps, stopped. He was facing the mandala.
What's happening to my mind?
Daydreaming. That had to be it, letting his mind wander. The pressure of all those demons outside Colony's perimeter walls overwhelmed him with feelings of vulnerability. He had lost the insulation he had enjoyed shipside, exchanged the perils of the ship for the perils of Pandora.
Who would ever have thought I'd miss the ship?
The damned colonists were too brash, too quick. They thought they could barge in at any time, interrupt anything. They talked too fast. Everything had to be done right now. His comm console buzzed at him. Oakes depressed a key. Murdoch's thin face stared at him from the screen. Murdoch began speaking without asking leave, without any preamble.
My dayside orders say you wanted Illuyank assigned to...
Illiank's dead,
Oakes said, his voice flat. He enjoyed the look of surprise on Murdoch's face. That was one of the reasons for secret random sampling among the spy sensors. No matter what horrors you found, the information could make you appear omnipotent.
Find someone else for my guard squad, Oakes said. Make it someone more suitable.
He broke the connection. There. That was the way they did it groundside. Quick decisions. The reminder of Illuyank's death brought back the knot in his stomach. Food. He needed something to eat. He turned and once more found himself looking at the mandala.
Things will simply have to slow down.
The mandala rippled before his eyes, myriad grotesque faces weaving in and out of the design, folding upon themselves. Belatedly, he realized that one of the faces was that of Rachel Demarest. Silly bitch! The scream room had driven her out of her mind. What was left of her mind. Running outside like that. Enough people had seen the demons get her that no blame would be laid at his hatch. One problem gone. But running outside.
Everything reminds me of outside.
Someone else would have to be found to make the liquor deliveries to Old Wynn Ferry. Pure grain spirits he wanted now, and Ferry would have to get the message. No more pestering questions about that Demarest woman. Oakes found that his hands ached, and he realized both fists were clenched. He forced himself to relax, begin to rub at the beginnings of cramp in his fingers. Maybe another small drink of the wine. No.
All this frustration. For what?
Only one answer, the answer he had given Lewis so many times.
For this world.
Victory would give them their own safe world. Unconsciously, his right hand went out and touched the mandala. What a price! And Legata, historian, search technician, beautiful woman, perhaps she would be his queen. He owed her that, at least. Empress. His finger traced the maze of lines in the mandala, flowing intricacies. Politics is your life, not mine, Lewis had said. Lewis did not know what it cost. All Lewis wanted was his lab and the safety of the redoubt. Leave me alone here. You can proclaim and make policy all you want. They were a great team, one in front and one behind.
Maybe just a little bit of the wine.
He picked up the bottle and sipped from it. This Rajah Thomas would be eliminated soon, another victim of the kelp.
Lewis ought to drink more of this wine. They've really improved it.
Oakes sipped the wine, aerated it across his tongue with a slurping sound which he knew always made Lewis uneasy.
You really should treat yourself to some of this stuff, Jesus. You might smooth some of those lines out of your face.
No thanks.
All the more for me, then.
You and Ferry.
No, I can take it or leave it alone.
We have urgent problems, Lewis kept saying. But urgency should never mean hurry, incautious rushing about. He had told Lewis in no uncertain terms.
If we're relaxed and reasonable in our urgency to complete the redoubt, the solutions we find will be relaxed and reasonable.
Let me reread that.
If we're relaxed and reasonable in our urgency to complete the redoubt, the solutions we find will be relaxed and reasonable.
Much better. No need for chaos. He slurped more of the wine while staring at the mandala. The way those lines twisted. They, too, appeared to come right out of chaos. But Legata had found the design of it, duplicated it twice. Design. Pandora had its design, too. He just had to find it. Peel away all of this dissonance, and there would be the foundations of order.
We'll finish off the kelp, the runners. Chlorine. Lots of it. Things will start making sense around here pretty soon.
He lifted the bottle to take another sip, found that there was no more wine in it. He let the bottle slip out of his hand, heard it thump on the floor. As though that were the signal, his comm console buzzed at him once more. Murdoch again.
Demarest's people are asking for another meeting, Doctor.
Stall them. I told you to stall them.
I'll try.
Murdoch did not sound very happy with the decision. Oakes took 2 stabs with a finger to break the connection. How many times did you have to give an order around this damned place? Once more, he focused on the mandala.
We'll have some order around here pretty soon,
he told it. He realized then that he had taken too much wine. It sounded ridiculous, talking to himself in quarters this way, but he enjoyed hearing certain things, even if he had to be the one who voiced them.
Gonna get some order around here.
Where was that damned Legata? Had to tell her to get some order into things. As the rock silences the sea, the one in one silences the universe. That's the one with a capital O in one with a lowercase o. Silences the universe. Kerro Panille, translations from the Avata. Legata put her shuttle on automatic for its landing at the redoubt station. She leaned back into her couch and watched the shoreline sweep past beneath her. This time it was her own. It was early dayside, and she did not have to deal with Oakes or Lewis just yet, nor with demons or clones.
She had nothing to do but watch, relax, and breathe easy.
Highlighters.
She had seen them on Holo, and a few had skirted Colony while she was there, but these hung no more than 200 meters from the plaz in front of her.
Ship's teeth. They're huge.
She counted 12 of them, the largest one half again as big as her shuttle. Their bronzed orange sails caught the wind, and they tacked in unison, almost escorting her. The sunlight through the membrane of their sails shimmered rainbows all over them. Most of their tentacles were tucked up against their bodies. They each held a ballast rock with their two longest tendrils. The larger ones allowed the rocks to drag in the sea, forming a frothy wake. They tacked and tacked again, picking up on the shifts of wind. As her shuttle settled into its final glide path, she saw two of the smaller highlighters separate from the rest, pick up speed, and slam the boulders they carried into the plaz shield surrounding Oaks's private garden.
Garden.
She shuddered at the thought of the word. The boulders had no effect on the plaz. She could crash her shuttle into it and it might shatter, but rocks... The two highlighters disappeared in a flash so bright that for a few blinks she was blinded. When her vision cleared, she saw that her shuttle was down and linked with the entry lock, and that the two exploded highlighters had been a diversion. The others, all larger, slammed their rocks into the walls and plaz of the redoubt, The others, all larger, slammed their rocks into the walls and plaz of the redoubt, where it had already been damaged by the clones. Each boulder chipped off a few more chunks of the buildings before the sentries focused on the sails. The other highlighters, too, went up in a flash. The largest one was so close to the shuttle station when it exploded that it took part of the control tower and rigging with it.
They give their lives for this, she thought. They are either very foolish or very noble.
Several parts of the grounds were in flames, and a work crew, covered by sentries, was busy fighting the fires. Lewis beckoned her from the plaz veranda at Oak's quarters, and it was only then that she noticed the scorch marks across the dome of her shuttle. She opened her hatch and stepped out between the two sentries who escorted her along the covered way to the redoubt. There was a strong taint of chlorine lingering over everything.
At least we don't have to worry about runners, she thought.
Over the chlorine she caught the sea smell from the beach, and saw that the tide line had moved down several meters from its usual mark. The damp sand left behind was warmed by the suns. A heavy mist rose from it, dissipating in wisps over the rocks and the sea. She did not look at Lewis until she stepped up to the veranda.
Legata,
He offered his hand.
how are you?
The searching expression in his eyes told her all that she needed to know.
So that's why I'm here, she thought. He wants to explore my current utility before Oaks arrives. Quite well, she said. That was a wonderful display the highlighters put on. Did you arrange it just for me?
If I'd arranged it, it wouldn't have cost us damage we can't afford.
He led her inside and closed the hatch behind them.
How much damage?
He was leading her further inside, away from the plaz. She wanted to see the grounds, the repairs.
Not irreparable. Would you care for something to eat?
A woman with large, fan-like ears walked past them, accompanied by a normal crewman carrying a laser gun.
No, thank you. I'm not hungry.
At Legata's response, the woman turned, looked her full into the eyes as if she wanted to say something, then turned quickly and went outside. Legata remembered that a rallying cry of the clone revolt had been, "I'm hungry now," and she was embarrassed.
Those ears. Why?
She can hear a hooded dasher at 100 meters. That gives us a full second's advantage. Attractive, too, don't you think?
Yes, Legata said coldly.
Quite.
She noticed that Lewis was still limping, but she did not sympathize with him. Although she was curious about the details of the